Escape the Pizzaplex just came out, and I just want to say I'm right about everything all the time, and you should have believed me. Well, almost. Seriously though, not only is this book chock full of lore about the Pizzaplex and Gregory and Cassie and what's going on before Security Breach, it nearly confirms a lot of what I've been theorizing about that time period. So what is this book even about? Well, slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. Quick disclaimer before we get into it, the book came out 3 days ago, so please go out and get the book yourself. It's very, very good. I'm going to be going deep into spoilers for this book for this video and all theory videos on this book moving forward. But I will say, because of the nature of a choose your own adventure book and the quality and depth of the writing itself, it's still worth it to go and get and read the book even if you watch this video first. Like, yes, I'm going to spoil the book, but there's so many different endings and the way you get them is varied. It's not like I'm giving you a walkthrough. So one, if you want to read the book before watching these videos to fully avoid spoilers, I get it. But even if you watch this video first, please do go out and get the book and read it. It's very good. If I had to rank it among the other interactive novels, I'd probably say The Week Before is still my favorite, but this is a close second. Now, without any further ado, what is Escape the Pizzaplex? What happens in this book? The book follows Cassie and Gregory, and what they get up to when the two of them hide in the Pizzaplex until after closing and have the whole place to themselves after hours. The book takes place over 5 nights, in which Cassie endures scarier and deadlier pranks from Gregory, and pranks is in air quotes here. On the first night, while playing hide and seek with a manic and scary Freddy, she even thinks she's going to be killed by Glamrock Freddy. But at the last moment, Gregory pops out of his chest cavity and says that it was all a prank. On the second night, Gregory promises pranks are over, and instead he and Cassie play hide and seek with Monty. However, Monty is jittery and almost seems like something is wrong. His arms and head spasm at random times. There are electric shocks that jolt off him at random intervals. In some of the endings of this night, Monty does even kill you. If you're sufficiently far away and by yourself, Monty catches up to you so he can get you. But in other endings where Gregory's nearby, he swoops in and stops Monty, promising that it wasn't supposed to be like this. This isn't some kind of elaborate prank, but instead some programming he added to Monty went wrong, and he promises to work on it. The third night is where things really kick into gear. Cassie is just going to leave the Pizzaplex at the normal time. She's fed up with all of these quote-unquote pranks. But Gregory and Freddy ask her to stay. Freddy even essentially kidnaps her to make sure she stays overnight. They then explain to her that the Pizzaplex added a staff bot that Gregory and Freddy call the Reagent, which is essentially a staff bot with insect-like eyes fitted with a chemical tank on its back and 2 arms of spray nozzles. It was added to eliminate any biological material left in the Pizzaplex after hours. The fear is that Gregory and Cassie, to a computer, are biological material, so it might eliminate them. They have to find a way to stop it so they can continue safely hanging out after hours. Gregory and Freddy tell Cassie to wait in the kitchen while they go to fix it, but the reagent shows up in the kitchen anyway, and you have to avoid it to survive. Anytime the reagent gets too close and starts spraying its chemicals, Cassie feels immense throat and body pain and passes out almost immediately, giving us a game over. In fact, the only way to get out of this night alive is to hide long enough and secure enough that when we eventually get sprayed by the reagent, Roxy shows up at the last minute and we pass out. She rescues us and we wake up like 24 hours later the next night. Again, after the Pizzaplex is locked up for the night. Roxy tells you that Gregory and Freddy are still off trying to stop the reagent, but luckily, she's here to help Cassie survive and possibly escape. But as you go about your business, you find that Gregory and Freddy are arguing, and from a distance see Freddy kill Gregory, then go to hunt you. Eventually, Freddy catches up to you, and whether or not you find a way to defend yourself, right before they get Cassie, Gregory bursts out of Freddy's chest cavity and admits that it was, again, all a prank. This time, Roxy was in on it too, because Gregory told her that Cassie likes to be scared. Cassie runs off upset. Notably, on night 4, the reagent is still wandering about, and if it catches you, you do get a game over. The next day, Cassie is hiding in a supply closet all day, staying at the Pizzaplex, until eventually Roxy finds her and apologizes. They have a conversation, and Roxy explains that she doesn't know why she believed Gregory, to which Cassie tells her to scan her programming. When Roxy does, she finds that Gregory modified her programming, not only to prank Cassie last night, but he adjusted her programming to turn on Cassie again tonight, eventually attacking her. So Cassie and Roxy rush to a computer terminal to find it, and Cassie is able to locate and delete Gregory's programming. But now that the programming has been deleted, the monitor shows the reagent activating with a new target, specifically Cassie, even showing a picture of her face with a red X on it. You then have several options in front of you on how to encounter and surprise attack the reagent using Roxy, and it's where we get several endings to this story. But in one of these endings, you can actually find an executive access key off of the body of the reagent. The book then instructs you to start again from night 4 with this executive access keycard. If you do so, you're able to access the mysterious package in Monty's green room. Inside are his new claws, which we can instead give to Roxy. This not only gives you a new ending for night 4, where you eventually attack Freddy with Roxy, hurting Gregory a little bit, but on night 5, you can have Roxy attack the reagent directly instead of sneaking up on it. And when you do that, you're still successful, but this time when you leave the pizzaplex, you get this ending. Then you step outside the pizzaplex into the cool night air. A dark figure outside the entrance turns as you exit. It's Gregory. He gives you the biggest, most mischievous grin, then says, "So what game do you want to play tomorrow night?" Which implies that Gregory was the one behind the reagent this entire time. It was all just another quote-unquote prank. And that's the main story, but like I said, there's plenty of other avenues and endings you can get throughout the book, most of them resulting in Cassie dying. And there's a lot of lore I haven't touched on yet, but for today, I kind of want to focus on the main story and central piece of lore in this book, since this is the first video on the book. So what does the major story here mean? Well, first of all, I kind of have to defend this book a bit. Weeks before it actually came out, people were running all over Reddit and Twitter sharing not only spoilers of the story, but complaining that it was the most unexplainable, farthest from the canon book so far. And after reading the official book, I just have to say, what the hell were any of you talking about? This book? This is the most unbelievable book so far in the interactive novel series. Is that what we're saying here? The last book had the FNAF Avengers in it. The last book had an Ella/Circus Baby/Eleanor doll in the basement of the 1985 version of the pizzeria that tricked Oswald. The last book had Oswald put on rabbit ears, get his mind controlled by them, and then say the phrase, quote, "You feel very bunny." So you're telling me that this book is less believably connected to the lore than the last one? Because Gregory is too mean to Cassie in this book? Is that what we're talking about here? Because the main argument I've heard as to why this book is disconnected from the lore is that why would Cassie go back to save Gregory in ruin if he's been doing this to her for seemingly a long time? And look, part of me sees where that argument is coming from, but there is a perfectly rational explanation now that we can actually read the damn book. So what is all of this useful lore and evidence and the explanation for that question? Well, before we move on, can we just look me in the eyes? Can we please try to keep spoilers and complaints about the story of something until after it fucking comes out, please? If I have to see FNAF Twitter blow up about how some new entry is going to destroy the entire FNAF lore before it even comes out, I'm gonna lose it. I'm gonna lose it. Even Mark doesn't even want a piece of this. Luckily, I've got a backup. I think the most important and central piece of lore of this book is it tells us what the purpose of Gregory serving under Glitchtrap was. So with books like GGY and evidence we find in the games, many people, myself included, believe that before Security Breach, Gregory was a servant to Glitchtrap, much like Vanessa is as Vanny. And in GGY, he goes by Dr. Rabbit. So I've been saying that Dr. Rabbit is to Gregory as Vanny is to Vanessa, before the events of Security Breach. But we never really got a good why. My thinking was that Dr. Rabbit was defense while Vanny was offense. Essentially, Vanny was the one hunting people down, collecting their remnant, and doing whatever Glitchtrap wanted them to do with it. Meanwhile, Dr. Rabbit was setting up defenses, the arcade cabinets that house the consciousness of Gregory and Vanessa, the MXES system that's been fully intertwined throughout the entire pizzaplex, the programming that the animatronics protect Gregory and Vanessa. But this book not only defends part of that, but gives us an actual functional role for Gregory in this scheme. First of all, I have to point out that in this book, multiple times, Gregory is able and stated to change the programming of the animatronics, something I've been saying that GGY tells us and that he probably did in-game before Security Breach several times. So I'm just gonna take the W on that one. But what this book tells us is not only what Gregory has been doing, but even explains the missing people we see on the newspaper article in the bad ending when you leave through the front doors. That being that Gregory is the manipulator and bait to capture people for remnant extraction. And this book is showing us his main method and why it didn't work on Cassie. This entire book, we are put in more and more dangerous situations by Gregory because of his pranks, and some of them kill us. But if he can stop it and help it at the last minute, he does, right as we think we're about to die. Then he explains it was all a prank or an accident and apologizes. But the one thing he never stops is the reagent. Something that, from the secret ending of this book, we know Gregory targeted on Cassie, and that when it catches Cassie, her lungs and face immediately start to burn and she passes out. The one time we survive this encounter is when Roxy appears just in time to take us away, and we wake up like a day later. Whatever this gas is, it might kill you, but it definitely knocks you out for at least a day. So what is going on here? I think this is Gregory's main method on capturing victims to have their remnant extracted. Now, whether you believe that's just to create a vessel for Glitchtrap to inhabit, or you believe in Remnantplex, that they're using the remnant to power the whole pizzaplex, either way, we know there's a scooper in the basement, and someone at the pizzaplex has been using it, and this is how they're getting their fuel. Let me set the scene for you with Cassie to better explain this. Cassie is a normal child who loves the Freddy Fazbear pizzaplex, but one day, for unknown reasons, nobody shows up to her birthday party, and she is left all alone, not having any friends that she thought she did, until Roxy and eventually Gregory show up to her birthday party, making it her best birthday ever. And from then on, Cassie and Gregory become fast friends, especially because Gregory is able to help Cassie sneak into the pizzaplex after hours, in unbelievable joy for someone their age, so they can have the whole place to themselves. It's the best playground someone could ask for, and every night they get up to hijinks and become incredibly close and trusted friends. The only thing Cassie doesn't like is occasionally Gregory will prank her, or at least one of his pranks, which usually involves scaring her and making her think she's about to die. But she knows, at the end of the day, it's just one of Gregory's pranks. He does this all the time, and she'll be okay. Until one day, the reagent arrives. Gregory warns her that it's something the pizzaplex has added, and it's legitimately dangerous, so she needs to watch out. Now, any other kid would be helpless in this situation. Any other kid who fully trusted Gregory at this point would listen when he says wait in the kitchen. They would wait in the kitchen, the reagent would arrive in the kitchen, and they would be knocked unconscious by this gas. And now Gregory has an unconscious victim who he can bring alive to the scooping room to extract their remnant. Not only that, but if they found out about agony by this point, this would be one of the most pure remnant collections ever, because this is admittedly one of the least agonizing deaths in this franchise. It hurts and it's scary, don't get me wrong, but they're knocked unconscious and then killed, essentially dying in their sleep. Cherry on top is the name of this bot itself, the reagent. In context, that makes no sense. In chemistry, a reagent is a substance that is added to a system of substances to induce a chemical reaction. And if this is truly to prep people for remnant collection, maybe whatever this chemical is not only knocks someone out, but preps their body to produce a lot more remnant. It's doing a chemical reaction to the human body. This is Gregory's job while he's under the control of Glitchtrap. Vanny is the one extracting the remnant, injecting it into burn trap or whatever they do with it, and making sure nobody gets caught by adjusting the security logs and handling the police. Meanwhile, Gregory's job is to target or create a lonely child, either by finding one naturally or making sure a birthday party goes wrong. Then he gains their trust and brings them to the pizzaplex after hours, wearing down that fight or flight with these pranks, making sure that if they ever think they're truly in danger, they'll think it might be one of Gregory's pranks and they won't be as on guard. And once he's manipulated them enough, he sicks the reagent after them, knocks them unconscious, and brings them to the scooper. So then, why doesn't this work on Cassie? Well, that's because I lied about Cassie. She's not a perfectly normal child. She's also a savant with technology and programming, and she has an intimate knowledge of the pizzaplex and its locations because her father worked at the place. With that knowledge and her coding experience, she is able to outmaneuver and outwit Gregory at every turn. And that's why she's still there for Ruin. But then, I hear you. Like people have said, if Cassie knows that Gregory sent the reagent something that would kill her after her, and adjusted all this programming to make Roxy attack her, why would she ever go back for Ruin to save him? Well, I've got two reasons for this, and one is speculative, and one has hard evidence behind it. The speculative one is I still think after Escape the Pizzaplex and before Security Breach, Cassie is the one who finds the Balloon World arcade machine in the daycare loft and beats it to free Gregory. And if she learns about Glitchtrap's control of Gregory, then she would most likely forgive a lot lot of what he's done. He was literally mind controlled. But that's speculation. Here's some hard evidence. The only ending in where it's implied that she at all finds out that Gregory was behind the reagent isn't canon. And I'm confident in saying that, because that ending you need to give Roxy the Monty clause, in which Roxy says she likes them so much she's going to keep them. But of course, in Security Breach, Roxy has the eyes upgrade and Monty has his claws. So either they're taken away from her forcibly, or this is the book telling us that this isn't the canon ending. Not to mention, the only way to access this is by taking an item from a different ending and restarting with it. Meaning, in the timeline, Cassie never had the item she needed to get the claws in the first place. So to Cassie, she doesn't know Gregory sent the reagent after her, the only legitimately dangerous thing in the pizzaplex, the thing that Gregory warned her about. And as far as the programming goes, because they thwarted it, she doesn't know that that programming would have killed her. She'd be dead if she found that out. So to her, it's just another mean prank that Gregory pulled. And yes, would a bunch of mean pranks that scared the hell out of you make you not like someone that much? I agree. I would also be pretty mad. But if a friend who's pranked me repeatedly and scared the hell out of me and been generally pretty mean to me suddenly emailed me or texted me or called me and said, "Hey, I've been trapped underneath the pizzaplex, and I know you have the wherewithal to find me. Please help," I'm gonna answer that call. But like I said, this is just the surface of the lore in these books. I didn't even have time to get into what it tells us about Cassie's dad, or the way that the upgrades worked and who might have gotten them in the first place, or the fact that twice in this book, Gregory uses an elevator to kill Cassie. Doesn't that sound familiar? But those will be saved for future theory. I may have officially gone crazy, but I was going through some assets to make a video the other day, and I noticed something. Something that, if I'm right, could give us some more major insight as to what's currently going on in the FNAF story. But if I'm right is a major question. But it does have to do with Princess Quest. Slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. So what is Princess Quest? Princess Quest 1, or at least at the time Princess Quest, first appeared in the Help Wanted mobile port. It was an unlockable secret within the prize counter, but beating it didn't change much about the game. It was just kind of there and we had to figure out what it could have meant. But that was Help Wanted. Security Breach is really where Princess Quest takes center stage, because Princess Quest 1, 2, and 3 are hidden throughout the pizzaplex. Princess Quest 1 you simply have to find, but to play Princess Quest 2, you need to have beaten the first one. And beating both Princess Quest 1 and 2 and finding the location of 3 throughout a playthrough unlocks the ability to go back at the end of the game and confront Vanny, beating Princess Quest 3 and freeing Vanessa from Vanny's influence. The games themselves are fairly straightforward. In the first one, we're playing as a princess with a lantern, and we're simply avoiding monsters, lighting our way, and eventually being cornered by this weird purple rabbit glitchy mess. In the second game, we're given a sword and able to somewhat fight back, but when we get to the end, there's this glitchy door. Instead of ending the game in the bed, you can enter that door, and you're put into a FNAF 1 styled security office. Then within Princess Quest 3, we continue from where we left off, going through a Help Wanted 1 styled lobby, and facing off in the Fall Fest maze with Grim Foxy and all to get the Vanny mask, and doing these weird treadmill puzzles around Chica to get the Glitch Trap plushie. Once we get both, it gives us a key to get to the Help Wanted style locked door, opening it, hearing Glitch Trap scream, and that's when Vanessa is freed from Vanny. There's also a fourth Princess Quest in Help Wanted 2. This one is a lot more confusing, and it seems to be a creation directly by Vanny or Glitch Trap. It's hard to tell. So for now, we'll leave that aside. But why do I bring up Princess Quest at all? Not very long ago, I spoke about the connections between Fiona, or at least F10 and 4, and Princess Quest, and how I think M1 is modifying Princess Quest to help assist taking down Glitch Trap. After all, in Help Wanted 2, Mystic Hippo is the one who points us in the direction of Princess Quest 4, Mystic Hippo being a character that was originally created for Murray's Costume Manor, and if it was a character created by MCM, it was likely designed by Fiona. Because in Princess Quest 3, we were walking through what we at the time believed was a recreation of the Help Wanted 1 lobby, and while that may or may not be true, both that area and this Princess Quest 3 area are directly pulled from the prototype pizzeria underneath Murray's Costume Manor, which is very interesting when you think about where we spawn in Princess Quest 3, the security office, which in that prototype pizzeria is exactly where the F10N4 machine is located. Not to mention the two animatronics we encounter in this area are the two characters that were designed by Fiona Murray specifically. We have Foxy, which technically we don't know 100% for sure if Fiona designed him, but we know she designed Roxy and that Foxy is a part of that puppet show and she made puppets, so it's incredibly likely. And Chica, a character that we have direct confirmation was visually designed by Fiona, at least the design for the suit. Obviously, Chica's party world seems to have existed before they contacted MCM, but Fiona was involved in the design of the new version of Chica that moved forward. So, okay, if I've said all of this before, why am I bringing it up again? Why does Fiona being connected to Princess Quest matter today? What is this weird out there connection that I keep bringing up about the princess? Well, it's not about the princess. It's about Chica, Party Chica, the one from Chica's party world. See this original design here? The way the head is tall but rounded at the top and flared out at the bottom with little frills, and the way that the top has a protrusion with 3 points, and the way that she's fully yellow. One other character shares all of these traits. I promise this is going somewhere. Look, if it was just this visual connection, I wouldn't bring it up, but I believe this connection is a purposeful thread of a much larger tapestry. Because I admit, this is one of the most, "that's nice grandpa, let's go to bed," theories I've ever created. But consider the connections here. We have direct messages saying that Fiona Murray is literally the person who designed this Chica. Chica's Party World commissioned Murray's Costume Manor to make a suit for their main mascot, and it's commented on that they wish the suit looked a little bit more like the original design, but judging from the blueprints we have and the art alongside it, this is pretty similar. But even if you don't want to use the suit, this art, which is inspired by the same design, shows the same thing. Long head, rounded top, flared bottom, 3-point crown. So, how interesting that the princess within Princess Quest shares many similar design features to a character that was directly created by Fiona Murray. I see 2 possibilities for what this could be telling us. Either, in her life, Fiona Murray designed the Princess Quest game, which I don't think is very likely looking at the timeline. Arcade cabinets did exist in the 70s, and while they were more primitive, technology being realistic was never really an issue with Five Nights at Freddy's. I mean, the sister location bunker was created sometime in the 80s, and that's tech we don't have today. But this would have been under the Murray's Costume Manor banner, and as far as we're aware, MCM never built arcade cabinets, so Fiona Murray wouldn't have done that. The other possibility is that this character was created by F10N4, the M1 version of Fiona, the thing that in some ways still seems to be an active player in this story. So if F10N4 created the princess herself of Princess Quest, who's to say that this isn't a game being modified by Fiona, but rather this entire game is created by F10N4. Princess Quest 3 literally shows us spawning where the F10N4 machine is located, and then we literally go through the room that was built originally to house the new animatronics that Fiona was designing. And in that area, we face off not only against Chica, the one character that is directly confirmed to be created by Fiona Murray, but we're going to the Fall Fest inspired area, facing off against another likely Fiona creation that's on fire. You know, how Fiona died at a fire in Fall Fest. Princess Quest 3 is literally 100% about Fiona Murray. What if Princess Quest and all of its iterations are full creations by F10N4? This game didn't exist before Fiona was trying to take down Glitchtrap. In the FNAF interview with Steel Wool, J-Top pointed out that the dialogue being so choppy in Princess Quest is purposeful. The reason he gives is it's a reference to those older, janky arcade translations, like the classic X-Men, "Welcome to Die." But with all of this information in tow, that might not be the only reason anymore. If F10N4 created the entirety of Princess Quest from scratch, well, it didn't create it from scratch, did it? After all, F10N4 is M1, or rather the first successful iteration of a mimic program. A mimic program who's only able to observe things it sees, mash them together, and output something. It cannot create something new. So in creating Princess Quest, every weird reference we're seeing is literally F10N4 pulling on what it knows to create something new. We see the exact same thing in Help Wanted with Glitchtrap when it makes the pizza party level, which is just a mishmash of everything else we've seen in the game thus far. And the dialogue of the old man follows with this as well. It's so choppy because it's not new dialogue. M1 is not sitting here writing things out. It's taking dialogue that it knows and things it can copy and mashing it together to make some sort of logical sentence. All of this including the princess, which is why even though this looks like a new character, a lot of its design has been directly ripped from something that Fiona had already made. Okay, so like level with me. Am I crazy? Have I lost it? Because again, like I looked at this and this at the same time and my first thought was, oh God. But I understand, you know, it could just be a coincidence. Unfortunately, Scott does do coincidences quite often, but I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. Have I officially lost it? You be the judge. One of the most glaring mysteries of Security Breach is that Bonnie and Foxy are missing. Characters that have been a part of the franchise since 2014 are suddenly replaced by Roxy and Monty, two random new characters. In the past, I had focused on trying to solve why Bonnie and Foxy are missing and where they've gone, and I'm still fairly confident in those theories. But something I didn't address is the grander picture here. What is happening to the animatronics of the Security Breach pizzaplex? Sure, Bonnie and Foxy are missing, but why are they still gone? If Bonnie was destroyed by Monty or something, why wasn't he just replaced with a new Bonnie? What was the goal here? Was it going to get worse? Well, genuinely, I think so. Because actually, I think one of the joke endings of Security Breach might be more accurate than we've been being led to believe. Slices, put on your aprons, and let's bake ourselves a theory. So what do I mean when I say they're missing? Like I mentioned in the intro, the main lineup of Security Breach is Glamrock Freddy, Glamrock Chica, Montgomery Gator, and Roxanne Wolf. No Glamrock Bonnie, and no Glamrock Foxy. When the game first came out, this turned a lot of heads, and the game itself points out Bonnie's absence quite frequently. I mean, there's the whole Bonnie bowling section, but there's duffel bags from staff members asking what to say and what the official line is for what happened to Bonnie. There's even the fact that if you bring Freddy to the stage Bonnie would have performed at, he mourns the loss of his boyfriend.
I do not come up here anymore. I miss him.
But that is kind of it. And we get no information on Foxy. He's never even mentioned. He, as Foxy, is around. He's a giant statue in Kids Cove. There's posters featuring him, standees featuring him, but no Glamrock Foxy anywhere to be found. Not even in that merchandise. It's just Foxy, at least until Ruin. In Ruin, we actually do get the vestiges of these characters. Through an incredibly difficult Easter egg, we're able to find Bonnie's shattered body in the back of Bonnie Bowling, along with green markings around his giant chest cavity. And we do get to learn more about a possible Foxy at the pizzaplex, but it's not necessarily about his disappearance. We see an unfinished Foxy log flume area, and more Foxy iconography around it. Even in Help Wanted 2, we get to play through a finalized version of this attraction, but still, no implications that Foxy was ever at the pizzaplex. If anything, seems more likely that Foxy was going to be brought in very soon. But what makes me say that? I've made a couple videos on this topic before, but when introducing new concepts or products to a business, companies will often test the waters. It's a way to see if there's any consumer interest before committing money to the project. They want to make sure it doesn't immediately blow up in their face. For example, in most of my videos, the gameplay I show is actually my gameplay, as a way to market test the idea that, hey, I do stream on twitch.tv/RightToastYT Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and Saturday every single week at 9 p.m. EST. And then I upload those gameplay videos and shorts to my second channel, RightToast. Always be plugging. But I've made videos in the past that I think this is what the pizzaplex is doing with Foxy. Foxy was always sort of an oddball character in the Fazbear routine. He had a separate stage, he was always out of order, he's notoriously a bit dangerous. So it does kind of make sense for them to leave out Foxy in the initial launch, but then still put out Foxy movies and merchandise to see if people do still like the character. And if that's successful, then you can add him later on. To this day, I think it's a very fair interpretation. But there's one issue. The question is still why? Regardless of why Foxy wasn't there to begin with, why are they suddenly trying to add him now? If the pizzaplex was so confident to open a Freddy's location without Foxy, why are they changing course to add him after the fact? Well, to better explain it, let's look at our other disappearance here, Bonnie. Now this is a disappearance we have some more meat to chew on about. Like I mentioned in Security Breach proper, we get several duffel bags mentioning not only staff wondering what to say, but security logs showing that Bonnie was last seen heading into Monty Gator Golf. Then come Ruin, where we're directly shown the corporate reason given for why Bonnie's no longer around. A farcical story about Bonnie retiring from the band and giving his role in the band to Monty. But clearly that's not the full picture, because we get to go to Bonnie's green room in Bonnie Bowling, and in there we see that he seemed to be enjoying his life and there's no signs that he was about to retire, not to mention the fact that he's a robot and they don't do that. And to top it all off, if you find every single wet floor bot and turn them off, which is a crazy thing that still is weird to explain, you find a hidden back room in Bonnie Bowling with the shattered Glamrock Bonnie behind it, all with those green markings around his torn open chest. There's a lot of interpretations on why Bonnie disappeared. A lot of people assume that Montgomery Gator is the one who took him down. After all, he's one of the more violent animatronics, and there are green markings around the chest, and he was last seen entering Monty Gator Golf. So it's a very valid explanation. I've also seen an incredible theory by Bon Jonzi that I've talked about on this very channel that implies that Glamrock Bonnie was sort of the Glamrock Freddy before Glamrock Freddy, aka an animatronic that resisted the influence of whatever's going on at the pizzaplex and was about to find out until he was stopped by those weird green staff bots just outside the underground pizzeria. Then on the chase back up, was finally caught and destroyed in the Roxy garages, which is why this carpet matches a very similar cutout shape in this carpet. But here's the thing, as fun and engaging of a theory as it is to figure out exactly why Bonnie was destroyed, there's something many of us really haven't talked about, and that's why he never came back. Sure, he was demolished in some weird series of events, but why did they just leave him remain demolished? There's literally a warehouse filled with dozens to hundreds of Glamrock endoskeletons ready to be utilized at a moment's notice. It's almost comical how many backup endoskeletons they have at the ready at any given time. Do you really think a company that's wasting this much money to make these many extra endoskeletons doesn't have a couple extra exoskeletons? Surely there's a couple extra casings lying around that could be utilized. So even if this body was destroyed, why didn't they just make a new one? Vanessa herself threatens Freddy in security breach, saying she'll slap his casing on a new endoskeleton at a moment's notice, which implies it's not difficult to recreate these animatronics from the ground up. I wouldn't doubt if they streamlined it, just plug the endoskeleton in and say, be a Freddy, and it's a Freddy now. Yet they don't. Keeping the group as Freddy, Chica, Monty, Roxy, and planning to add Foxy is a deliberate and continuous choice. So then, why? What do these characters have in common that would give somebody a reason to make them the frontliners of the pizzaplex? Well, there is one connection we know of definitively in a post-Secret of the Mimic world. Almost all of them are Murray's Costume Manor original characters. I like the shirt, by the way. One of the most revealing parts about Secret of the Mimic was finding out how many characters that we thought were Fazbear brand characters originated from Murray's Costume Manor. I mean, the moment we enter the facility, we literally see a standing animatronic of an alligator playing an instrument. And even if you're not convinced that this is supposed to be Monty, what about this Springlock suit that looks a lot more like him in the end of the game? Both Roxy and Foxy are directly name dropped in the puppet show play featuring both of them. Not to mention, Roxy has her own shootout minigame, so she's so popular, she had 2 variants. And according to the home tapes we find in Murray's house, Roxy was one of the first characters Fiona designed as a puppet for David. And then we get to Chica, who has an entire section dedicated to telling the player that although Chica's Party World is actually a different restaurant, they commissioned Murray's Costume Manor to make the animatronic, which means Foxy, Roxy, Monty, and Chica were all animatronics originally designed by Fiona Murray. And in a world that we know a large part of M1/F10N4, Fiona in Lead Speech, was based off of Fiona Murray's personality, the idea that that very same mimic is controlling the pizzaplex and now is slowly replacing all of the main characters with characters that are its creations makes perfect sense. But I hear you, sure, this can all line up, but what about Freddy? Isn't he too iconic to risk? Could they really replace Freddy Fazbear at the Fazbear Mega Pizzaplex? Well, in some timelines, they do. One of the less talked about endings of Security Breach is the loading bay exit, because ultimately it does feel a little silly. Every other ending has some sort of gravitas about it. I mean, the main exit shows Gregory being captured and killed. Obviously, the Burn Trap and Vanny endings are super important because they tell us more about those antagonists. Already, that's 4 of the endings, all being very important to the lore. Then there's the fire escape exit and the loading bay exit. 2 of the weirder exits, to be fair. You actually need to collect a certain amount of collectibles to even unlock them. But when you do, you get heavily rewarded. The fire escape ending is one of the most confusing of all, showing us that the person behind the Vanny mask was Vanessa, and then immediately showing Vanessa herself looking sadly upon her own body. This has spawned dozens of theories and is incredibly important to the lore. And likewise, when you unlock the loading bay exit, you get Gregory running over Mapbot, Jump-starting Freddy with a car battery and driving off into the sunset. And this newspaper article saying that fucking glam rock Mr. Hippo takes over in the band. What? It feels very deliberately silly, which is weird because all of these endings are very serious and very filled with lore, except for the van ending. Or is it? Maybe this news article, this seeming joke, is meant to be the lore we're walking away with, because wouldn't you know it, but the moment Freddy is unavailable, the replacement they use is yet again another Murray's Costume Manor original. Remember that Monty that I showed you? Who's directly next to him but Mr. Hippo? Double that down with the fact that Mystic Hippo, a branch off of this character, shows up in Help Wanted 2 and again in Secret of the Mimic. This ending is telling us that if Freddy, for whatever reason, ever goes out of commission or disappears, it would be replaced by yet another character designed by Fiona Murray. So what is the implication here? I wouldn't make this whole video just to say that Fiona likes her own characters and wants them to be part of the band. What does the band slowly being replaced with characters designed by Fiona Murray actually mean? I think this is telling us that the pizzaplex is already fully under the control of M1 or F10 and 4. Think about it. Every time one of the animatronics gets destroyed or goes away, it's replaced by a character designed by Fiona, the woman that F10 and 4 was based to copy. They could have brought in any other character for these replacements, at least more relevant ones. They could have brought back Balloon Boy. There's plenty of Circus Baby merchandise. It could have been Circus Baby or Ballora, who in the novels do occasionally show up. Ballora has her own weird fitness attraction in the books, which is, by the way, I think one of the scariest books for me. One of my biggest horrors is cave diving, and that scratches that itch in a way that makes me very uncomfortable to read it. But instead of any of these characters that have branding and merchandise all ready to go, whoever chose them chose arguably the most obscure characters they possibly could have. Characters that, as far as we know, have not had any promotion or relevance for half a century. Why did they pick them? The only logical answer I can figure is that Fiona was the one who picked them, which implies Fiona has control over what they're picking. So is M1 or Fiona Glitchtrap? After all, Glitchtrap seems like a mimic variant, and Glitchtrap does seem to have his greedy little paws all over this facility, but I think it's easier to make the case that Glitchtrap seems to be coded as if it's trying to still infiltrate the pizzaplex, not already fully controls it. And I think Fiona fully controls the security breach pizzaplex. Frankly, I think this is what the puppet imagery we keep seeing was meant to convey. Not that Charlotte's still around, rather to show us F10 and 4's influence. In Secret of the Mimic, who is the first major antagonist and the character in basically all of the marketing? Jackie. I mean, for God's sakes, she's fucking Backy. To be clear, M2 is the one wearing Jackie during the game. But yet again, for the umpteenth time, Jackie is a character designed by Fiona Murray. A character who, when damaged during the chase sequence, begins to look a lot like Nightmare Own. Something pointed out by several other theorists. Similarly pointed out by other theorists is that her jump scare noise has the Nightmare Own FNAF 4 jump scare buried inside of it. And what do we see all over the pizza place? Wires and cables that look a lot like Nightmare Own's limbs. Staff bots that on a dime can look like Nightmare Own and whose jump scare has that same Nightmare Own FNAF 4 layer undercut inside of it. There's Nightmare Own plushes all over the facility. F10 and 4's influence, if being shown like this, infiltrates every aspect of the pizzaplex, but it goes one layer further down. Fellow theorist Johnny the Night Guard noticed something insane recently.
The nightmare sound effect also plays when you get jump scared by nightmare staff bots in Security Breach, which also look like Nightmare Own. I also found conduit tubing that looks just like Jackie's arm in the nightmare staff bot section.
Like he said, there's a pit of Nightmare Own staff bots and cable tubing that looks just like Jackie's arm. But wouldn't you know it, in this area, there's two of those tubes, both of which stretch out from the pit of Nightmare Own staff bots. In a way, visually, this is telling us that the entire pizzaplex is being supported by a massive pit of F10 and 4's influence, whose arms outstretch to span its width, holding the entire pizzaplex in her hands. F10 and 4, or M1, is fully in control of the pizzaplex. It's Glitchtrap who has to worm his way into the system. Oh, eepy. I really think this is where all of this is trying to point to us to. Something that we'll probably find out in the next game or so. That F10N4/M1 is the thing controlling the pizzaplex, and Glitchtrap was trying to worm its way into its systems. But let me know what you think in the comments below. I might be genuinely losing it at this point. One of the most clowned on FNAF theories post-security breach was GregBot. The idea that this kid is secretly an animatronic. And like, sure, there is evidence to suggest it, but in Five Nights at Freddy's, there's enough vague evidence that you could make a decent argument for anything, however unlikely it might be. But in the big 2026, especially after Secret of the Mimic and Escape the Pizzaplex, was there any credit to this theory? Well, kinda. Slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. So why did people think that? On the surface, the idea that Gregory, this human child, was a robot is almost laughable, but there is decent evidence to support this theory. Most of it centering around the fact that Gregory's just straight up weird. He's so weird as a character. His first introduction is him forgetting his name?
I'm Gregory.
As far as we're aware, he's got no family history. He's been at this pizzaplex for God knows how long. He still remains outside, and when he does actually escape the pizzaplex, he goes to a cardboard box instead of running home. But seemingly this child who lives at the pizzaplex and doesn't have any family can hack really good and is super smart. Not to mention whenever Vanny gets too close to us, his eyes do this weird CRT filter flicker. Just as a character, he's strange, and other people react strange to him. Glamrock Freddy, after knowing this kid for 5 minutes, says, "You are broken," and brings him to a medical bay thing. That's a weird thing to say to a human being. And if he is a robot, we have evidence to suggest how that would make sense. The idea that Vanny was looking up realistic human masks, and the fact that there's a silo that seems to be dedicated to a robot learning how to act like a child. Like, there is a lot of evidence for this theory. As far as what the theory actually specifically was, there's a lot of different interpretations, but most of them center around the idea generally that Glitchtrap was trying to in some way recreate the Afton family. And when looking at what to replace the crying child with, making a robotic version of a small child like the crying child worked. It was good enough. Hence the creation of a GregBot. But just before security breach happens, like the moment before, Freddy and Gregory are somehow reset and freed from Glitchtrap's control. And now these two robots have to make the most sense out of what they've been dealt with. So how does Secret of the Mimic change this? Well, the wildest part of that game is its third secret ending, where theoretically, you could have reset M2 into behaving like David, the boy that M1 wanted the robot to be, Edwin Murray's late son. And it does this. It resets into a childlike size, acts like a child, walks over to the bed, kicks his feet, goes to bed. It's really cute. And like, this is a FNAF game directly showing us a major character robot acting like a small boy. If you throw a convincing enough skin suit onto that thing, it might be Gregory. Not to mention M2, the other major antagonist of this game, whose entire goal is specifically to make the Mimic act like a little boy again. So the entirety of Secret of the Mimic is giving credit to the idea that, well, Gregory could be a robot if it's the Mimic. But do we have any reason to believe that Gregory is the Mimic? Well, we have the GregBot reasons from before, and Security Breach Ruin came out, which gave us 1,000 reasons to believe that Gregory is the Mimic, and one reason that pretty much debunks it entirely. Now, similar to Secret of the Mimic, the entirety of Ruin sort of gives credence to the idea of a Gregory robot, like the entire game existing at all. After all, the point of the game is that the Mimic can nearly perfectly recreate Gregory's voice. And we find out that it's currently trapped under the pizzaplex with Gregory's backpack right outside the room, left there. There's a very logical through line to this if the true ending to the security breach is us failing, getting caught by an animatronic or by Vanny, and not escaping the pizzaplex. Or even the main exit of leaving out the front doors, only to be quickly collected by Vanny once we're outside. If we as Gregory are the Mimic, and one of these bad endings happen, then logically the rest of it follows suit. Vanny captures us, traps us underneath the pizzaplex, and leaves us there. Then when everything starts falling apart, we're still stuck there. But we still can pretend to be Gregory. so we use that to lure Cassie to let the mimic out again. The entirety of Ruin works so incredibly well into giving more evidence for Gregory being the mimic, except for the ending, which outright disproves it. While the mimic is actively fighting Roxy, Cassie gets a call on her walkie-talkie from Gregory, the real Gregory, who's apparently been trying to reach her this whole time. He didn't even tell her to go to the pizzaplex. She's not supposed to be there. And frankly, I find it beyond belief that the mimic could one hand fight off Roxy and in the other hand talk into the walkie-talkie, and we wouldn't even hear that, let alone he can do that. But even if you're skeptical and you think that the mimic can pull that off, immediately after this, the mimic throws a forklift, jumps down, and we see its full body and both empty hands. It doesn't have the walkie-talkie anymore, and yet Gregory continues to talk to us through it. So there is a real Gregory. Or at the very least, this is basically confirmation that there is a Gregory separate from the mimic. You could technically make the argument that Gregory's still a robot, he's just not the mimic, but it seems incredibly strange to me to have Gregory be a robot that isn't the mimic in a game where the mimic exists. Like, it's kind of like double dipping, you know? So if Gregory isn't the mimic, what's the point of all this weirdness? How are they connected? Why are there so many connections between the mimic and Gregory? Well, like many of us had suspected, Gregory isn't physically the mimic, but his mind was controlled by it, like Vanny. And now we might know how. Any game that we see Glitch Trap in, whether it be Help Wanted, Security Breach, Ruin, Help Wanted 2, we see it have the ability to take over somebody's mind. Now, the specifics are never specified, but I tend to think that since the mimic is Glitch Trap, very likely anyway, the way Glitch Trap takes over someone's mind is it iterates upon itself. It makes a copy of itself, like M1 to M2, M2 to possibly M3 being Glitch Trap, and all that the mimic is doing isn't necessarily mind controlling somebody, but making a copy of itself in their mind. After all, the mind is sort of a biological computer, so whether or not this would actually work, there's enough wishy-washy science that it works in this weird sci-fi paranormal story. So Vanny isn't Vanessa being mind-controlled, but rather an iteration of Glitch Trap operating within Vanessa's mind. Now, the books have heavily suggested the same thing happened to Gregory before Security Breach. Stories like GGY and the full book Escape the Pizzaplex pretty much directly show us Gregory acting as though his mind is taken over by Glitch Trap. In GGY, he's killing therapists and anyone who looks into him, and Escape the Pizzaplex, he literally torments and tries to kill Cassie for an entire week, which if he's not being controlled by Glitch Trap is fucking crazy. Now, in the past, when I've made the argument that Gregory was under the control of Glitch Trap, the how always sort of felt flat. Now, in VIP, we had an AR mask that had the mimic inside of it, so I did make the argument that maybe that's how Gregory was turned, but there was never any evidence that Gregory ever used an AR or VR mask. It was sort of just an assumption, and that's where it sat. Until recently, I got a theory suggestion on my Patreon. Now, I collect questions for the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast, the weekly podcast we have on this channel, both via email and on my Patreon. And recently, a patron by the username Moose Guys suggested this. I think it would make sense if Gregory got possessed by the Mimic 1 virus the same way as Vanessa/Vanny, through glitchy tapes, but where he differs is that it wasn't cassette tapes, but VHS tapes. I think this due to the teasers before Security Breach, the Freddy and Friends on tour. In them, we see glitches, and if you put all of them together, you see a picture of Glitch Trap. That's a huge parallel to Vanessa/Help Wanted gameplay, where you collect glitchy cassette tapes, and when you get more, the more you see Glitch Trap. Another point of minor evidence I like is Dawko's Steel Wool interview before Security Breach. When asked about the Freddy and Friends on Tour cartoons, he said that if you watch those, you're already playing Security Breach. If you look at it, you play as Gregory in Security Breach. So if you're already playing it when you watch them, the person watching should be Gregory too. What an interesting take that is. And it makes a lot of sense. Think of that one very strange line right near the end of a normal playthrough of Security Breach. While we're in the elevator to the main exit, Vanessa's talking over the intercom, and she says,
Gregory, I think you deserve a reward.
It's emphasized, it's focused on. Frankly, it's so out of place that many of us make jokes about it. Like, why does she say it like that? But what if the reason that line seems like it's emphasized is because it is? Because it's a callback to something that we didn't actually see in-game, but something Gregory experienced. What if that's the line Vanny used to lure Gregory into a room to watch the tapes? After all, there's one secret room we haven't talked about in Security Breach so far, and it's the retro CD sister location living room looking secret room. It's a strange room, one that seems inexplicably important to the lore, but never really explained why. After all, there's parts of this room that do make sense. We have the retro CDs that show us more about Vanessa while she was being controlled by Glitchtrap, and Patient 46, which, after GGY and Escape the Pizzaplex, I think it's fair to assume that Patient 46 is Gregory. So we have the origins of these two characters, we have the strange code on the wall, and all of this is incredibly lore relevant. But up until now, many of us just assumed that the TV playing Freddy and Friends on tour isn't lore relevant. What if it was? After all, if we were already playing the game as Gregory watching Freddy and Friends on tour, maybe this was where it happened. Maybe this was the room where it happened, the room where it happened, the room where it happened. Not only would this make sense, but it lines up with how the Mimic, as Glitchtrap, would collect a victim. If the Mimic is truly replicating what William did, well, William was one to lead a child into a back room and then kill them. But even though Glitchtrap isn't trying to kill Gregory, the same method applies. Picture it. Glitchtrap still needs a human boy to make this plan work, and as they keep scanning the different patrons of the Pizzaplex, Gregory gets noticed. This boy who spends countless days sneaking around the Pizzaplex, playing the arcade machines, he never seems to leave, and nobody's come to check up on him. He'd be the perfect victim. If he's been here this long, who would notice if he's stayed? So eventually, Vanny catches him playing an arcade machine, and approaches him. A brand new mascot suit Gregory doesn't recognize, and Vanny leans down and says, "Hey, you're really good at that. In fact, Gregory, I think you deserve a reward. You're one of our most loyal patrons and one of the best arcade players I've ever seen. You must be one of the biggest fans of Fazbear out there. How would you like to watch a rarely seen vintage cartoon? Simply follow me into this back room." Vanny then leads him to the secret sister location living room-like room and locks him in. Then he's left there in the dark, only able to watch the Freddy and Friends on Tour show, his mind slowly being taken over by Glitchtrap. It all makes perfect sense, and it leaves our three different likely victims of Glitchtrap's mind control, all with slightly different versions. Vanessa was captured using the cassette tapes, Gregory was captured using the VHS tapes, and Cassie was captured using the AR Vanny mask. So that's where I think Gregbot stands nowadays. I don't think Gregory was ever literally a robot or the Mimic, but I do think the Mimic iterated itself inside of his mind, much like Vanessa. And the idea that he did it through these VHS tapes makes a lot of sense. But let me know if I've gone absolutely crazy in the comments below. Theories like this are always, they hurt my brain. I genuinely believe today's theory might be the missing puzzle piece that many of us have been waiting for to actually figure out what's going on in the current timeline of Five Nights at Freddy's. So many of us have gotten rightly frustrated over the lack of direction as to what to do right now. We don't know what the big mystery is, we don't know what the goals of everybody is. Even after the revelation that most of the current timeline is happening because of the Mimic, we don't know what the Mimic's motivations are, so that doesn't help us. But we might now. All thanks to today's theory with an admittedly silly name. So what do I mean when I use the phrase Fiona adoption? Slices, put on your aprons and let's bake ourselves a theory. When climbing a mountain, we can't start at the top. Let's lay a good foundation before we address Fiona adoption. The first thing we really need to establish is, what is the mystery of Five Nights at Freddy's right now? What's the question? We've been spending close to 7 years in the current era of Five Nights at Freddy's. Help Wanted came out 7 years ago, and we're still not really sure what the mystery of the Steel Wool era of Five Nights at Freddy's is. We knew what the MCI was by FNAF 1, and there was enough information about the MCI that pointed us to care about it. And we knew what the issue because of that was, because there's haunted animatronics. We immediately got the what of the MCI and the effects of the MCI, and then as games came out, we learned about the why, the who, and how to stop it, or make up for it. But right now in the current era of Five Nights at Freddy's, we keep learning more and more about the why and the who and and the how, but we've never addressed the what. What's the issue? What's going on that needs to be stopped? Well, there's one possible what, but we've never had a reason to care about it until now. And it's one that's been staring us in the face since Security Breach. By now, we all know the bad ending of Security Breach, where Gregory escapes the pizzaplex, runs down the alleyway, and then just sleeps in a cardboard box, only to be captured again by Vanny. But there's an often non-discussed, fairly important detail in this ending that I think is of utmost relevance for this theory. The newspaper that tells us people are going missing around the pizzaplex. Now, straight away, I'm not trying to say nobody's brought this up or nobody talks about it. Plenty of people have theorized about this newspaper. I've even made theories about this newspaper before, but I think a lot of people, especially nowadays, myself included, have left this detail to the wayside. Because frankly, we still don't have enough details to tell us why exactly this newspaper of all things would be relevant to the current story. We don't know why people are going missing, so there's no real reason to look into it yet. And frankly, we probably don't know why due to the chopped nature of this game's development. Scott Cawthon himself has said in interviews that the development of Security Breach had some issues, largely in part due to the fact of Scott's own paranoia. He was worried that someone on the team would leak the lore of FNAF and then everything would be for naught, so he never told them the story of the game or the lore that it was trying to tell. He only told them to do specific things in specific places and hoped that we could pick up the pieces. And clearly that didn't work, because what we got was a confusing mess that says so many different things and at the same time, nothing at all. Now, I don't bring up those interviews to say that we should throw away Security Breach for theorizing. Hell no. This is one of the most important games to the FNAF lore, especially in the current timeline. And it is still a canon game that we do need to utilize. Scott himself said, the game is what we have and they're just going to course correct after the fact. By the way he talks about Security Breach, I personally take this game as a game of ingredients with no clear presentation. The specific aspects of the game are perfectly usable, but the way they're presented is messy and confused. And it's probably why this game has stumped so many of us for so long. I mean, a perfect example of this is that very same ending of the game. Right before you leave, you get the option to leave or stay. And in that conversation, Gregory, out of nowhere, says this.
Freddy, if I leave now, nothing will change, will it? There will be more disappearances.
It's almost comical. Like, the entire game, this has never been brought up a single time, but out of nowhere, as if this is a known fact, on the way out, Gregory goes, but if we leave, people will continue to go missing, right? Continue? Gregory, how do you know that? So to me, it's things like this that tell me this game was meant to be showing us that people are going missing over and over again. And if you dig into this game, you find aspects and examples of it. Not only do we have the newspaper and that one-off line, but we have the duffel bag messages about the all-staff meeting, where everyone was supposed to meet up for cake after hours, and wouldn't you know it, but it seems likely due to the other duffel bag messages and this room in the basement that that's probably where they were either all fired or possibly killed, which could explain some of those missing people. Obviously, people are going missing at this pizzaplex. And if we look at tales from the pizzaplex, we get not only more methods of how that's going, but more examples of victims that do in fact get killed or go missing. And looking at the books, a majority of these victims are children. There are some staff members, there are some adults, but the vast majority of the victims of Tales from the Pizzaplex are children around the pizzaplex. So again, we have evidence to suggest that children are going missing around the pizzaplex. It's like an MCI that's still going on and needs to be stopped. The games emphasize this, the books emphasize this, but it's never been center of a plot before. It's never been the reason why something's going wrong, so we haven't really cared or looked into it too much. There's never been a drive to solve why it's happening. So what if I told you that we finally have that why? The reason it's happening, the way to be able to stop it, and a reason that might finally crack the grander mysteries of the current era of Five Nights at Freddy's and give us a direction to chart for. And it all starts with Secret of the Mimic. Secret of the Mimic gave us a lot of information about the earliest aspects of the Five Nights at Freddy's timeline, telling us about Murray's Costume Manor, a separate business that was partnered with Fazbear and made them costumes and helped build things for them, and helped design some of its earliest animatronics. Furthermore, Edwin Murray owner of Murray's Costume Manor, most notably for today's theory, made the Mimic, the current antagonist of the FNAF timeline, an endoskeleton that's able to replicate anything it's seen, put on any costume, copy people's speech, and send it back to them. The entire plot of Secret of the Mimic is we are trying to obtain those Mimic schematics while avoiding the actual Mimic's homicidal tendencies. And in that process, we learn more about the Murrays and the Mimic itself. We learned that William Afton was attempting to sabotage Murray's Costume Manor to run it into bankruptcy so he could obtain the entire company. And to be honest, the company itself was doing very poorly with or without William's help. We also learned that one of the executives for the company, Fiona Murray, Edwin's late wife, was the person responsible for designing most of the animatronics and costumes. And I say late wife because before any of the Mimic shenanigans happened, she went to assist the running of Fall Fest and died in a fire. Every time I say that, my brain screams, "I hope you die in a fire!" And I've only ever heard that song like twice. This is kind of the start of a lot of the Mimic timeline. Edwin was likely already building a Mimic, judging from the tapes and logs that we get of him, but it's Fiona's death that he begins to utilize it once it's finished as a sort of pseudo babysitter, something to look after David and play with him while he's getting his job done. Over time, it begins to copy Fiona's mannerisms. Now, it's possible that Edwin built it under the idea that Fiona could possess it, because we get this one strange audio log where he thinks he's talking to the ghost of Fiona, so that might have been part of the reason why he made the Mimic, but it seems like he was making the Mimic before Fiona died. Anyway, it's a little messy. To be clear, I don't think Fiona's spirit possesses the Mimic. I don't think there's enough evidence to say that. I do think the Mimic was trying its best to become Fiona though, replicating her voice and all of the mannerisms it could. Granted, it was a facsimile of Fiona and was not nearly as independent as Fiona Murray herself was, being programmed to be much more subservient to Edwin and much more of just a dutiful mother and nothing else, but it was trying to replicate Fiona. However, who could have guessed that completely ignoring your child, letting a robot watch it, and letting him play next to a shipping yard would result in something bad, aka Edwin's son, David Murray, also dies. Not only does this obviously send Edwin to an even deeper grief spiral, but it also has another unintended consequence. The first iteration of the Mimic, M1, so far has been trained and programmed repeatedly to be a mother. Its entire goal is to watch over David Murray. He fully reduces the Mimic to only watching over David Murray, while he attempts to make a second Mimic to sell and use. Her entire purpose as a robot is to watch over David. She even tells us this at the end of the game.
I miss you, but I miss my child. I watched him grow up through this machine. I want him back.
But now, she cannot fulfill her prime directive. She is a robot created, essentially, to watch after a child, and now there is not a child to watch after. This is incredibly important, because as I've mentioned in previous theories, it seems likely that the Pizzaplex is undergoing some sort of a civil war between two different Mimic AIs. One of them is Glitchtrap, the one we've met in Help Wanted. The one that I believe is a new iteration of the Mimic, in M3, if you will. One that's been trained on William Afton's crimes via Help Wanted and is trying to replicate them in the real world. But I think another Mimic AI is at play, one that already has control of the Pizzaplex, one that the CEO themselves used to create the Pizzaplex, until it ultimately took their life and took over. And that Mimic AI, I believe, is M1/F10N4. Fiona. Now, are you seeing some of the pieces being put together here? Because to be honest, I hadn't for a while until somebody submitted a theory to my podcast. At this point, I feel like I say too much, but I host a podcast on this very channel called the Freddy Fazbear Pizza Podcast every single week, and I take in theories and questions via email and Patreon submission. One in particular caught my eye for this theory, and it's not one that I fully agree with, but one with enough sauce in it that I'm able to cook. The theory was submitted via email by Benjamin, who wrote an interesting thought about the Buddytronics from the Pizzaplex books. So what is a Buddytronic? We learn the most about them in the story Nexie, which features one of these Buddytronics. The Pizzaplex essentially sells plush animatronics that are smart and can function and talk to your children. And our main character Astrid gets a defective one because the mimic kind of like infected it as it was on the assembly line and it got all messed up, but she wants to keep it anyway because she's afraid her grandfather might change his mind after the issue. And then throughout the story, it keeps doing weird things and creepy things and violent things until eventually it tells Astrid, hey, if you make me a proper looking body and not this messed up endoskeleton, then I'll be beautiful and I can help you to be beautiful. And Astrid agrees. So they sneak into the pizzaplex after hours and Astrid builds a correctly shaped endoskeleton for a girl about her age. And then the twist is revealed where Nexi, instead of taking off her skin, skins and kills Astrid, puts Astrid's skin on the endoskeleton, and then uploads itself to that endoskeleton, basically becoming like a human robot girl thing. And it does not work. The very next day, Nexi, as Astrid, goes into class and everyone freaks out. But this is interesting, no? Well, Ben thought it was and brought up this idea about the Buddytronics. If we believe that when Arnold gets trampled by the Mimic and crashes his car, and the Mimic obtains the data diver, then it turns back into M1, and for all these years it is M1, until we turn off Mexis, allowing it to revert back to M2. If we take that theory into account, M1/Fiona might be luring kids with the Buddytronics, hopefully hypnotizing them and being the next variation of the Mimic program. This would make sense with M1's motive throughout Secret of the Mimic wanting its own child. This may seem like a stretch, but what if M1 actually just wants one of the children so she can have a child again? And I really like that motive. I don't necessarily agree with M2 becoming M1 and then going back to M2. I think M1 stays fully separate, but keeping in mind the motivation of M1 wanting a child again, something that is focused and central to the main plot of Secret of the Mimic, and combining it with my thoughts that Fiona currently controls the pizzaplex, then all the pieces kind of start to fall together, don't they? What is the true story of the current timeline of Five Nights at Freddy's? F10N4 had been laid dormant for years, running as many calculations as she could to try to find out how to finally achieve her purpose and look after a child, take care of them, raise them as her own, until eventually one day, she gets a golden opportunity. A new CEO is rolled into town and is trying to make a quick buck salvaging what they can of the Fazbear brand, and along the way encounters the F10N4 console. And once they do, all she has to do is convince this CEO how helpful she can be. After all of this technology started with something that is at the core helpful.
Well, how would you describe it in one word?
I guess I would have to say helpful. Yeah, at its core, it is helpful.
So she begins to help them remake the brand from the ground up. A new VR game to push all the bad PR out of the way. A shiny new pizzaplex. She even has some ideas on how to build it and who to put in it. This CEO has it easy. All he has to do is fund her ideas and they keep printing out money. All the while, her true goal is to get children interested in the brand again. After all, she needs a child to watch over. Once the pizzaplex is built, she begins laying the groundwork for several different kinds of lures and traps. Buddytronic toys that can replicate children and learn from them, bringing them closer to the brand itself. But again and again, it fails. The Buddytronics aren't real enough. Any child that's lured in is either too fragile or has parents too perceptive. She needs a child that won't break. A child that will last as long as she does. She needs a robot child. The tales in the Pizzaplex books are filled with people becoming robot-like and robots becoming person-like. And it's a strange motif that never really gets answered in Tales in the Pizzaplex, because I think that motif is meant to be answered in the games. F10N4's true goal right now is to make the perfect combination of human and robot. A child that looks and feels real, but will last as long as she does. And she'll sacrifice as many children as she needs to achieve that goal. And that's the take. That's Fiona adoption. That all of these children are going missing because Fiona is attempting to adopt a new child, trying to make some combination of human and robot. And there's a chance that if Glitchtrap really is just M1, which some people believe, then the reason it's trying to bring back William Afton isn't necessarily to bring back William Afton, but so that M1/Fiona can talk to the one person who crossed that gap, the one person who was human and became a robot to see what he knows. There's a lot of ways to look at it, but the idea that all of the children are going missing at the pizzaplex because Fiona wants a child again makes so much sense and lines up with everything we've read from the books, everything we know from the games, and what we learn at the end of Secret of the Mimic, where the game stops us in an elevator and reiterates the fact that all Fiona wants is a child again. It's really interesting. Let me know what you think in the comments below, but I think this might be it. This might be the why we've been looking for.